Hi guys, welcome back to Giant Talk, the world's first OKR podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Sten Pittet, co-founder and CEO at Tability, an OKR software that helps you move away from spreadsheets for focus and accountability. Today, Sten and I are going to talk about misalignment and why this might not be a bad thing. So Sten's actually joining me today from Australia, so I know it's quite late in the evening there, and it's just around 11 a.m. here in the UK, but it's Sten's evening, so I appreciate him taking the time out to talk to us for today. So welcome to Giant Talk, Sten. It's really great to have you with me for today's episode. Please can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. So as you can hear from my accent, I'm French. So I hope that you'll be able to understand me through this conversation. But yeah, so I'm an ex-product manager. And one thing that I faced with my team back when I was working was that we had great ways to track projects, but not a lot of good ways to understand and keep track of our goals. And so Tability, so we decided to build Tability to solve that problem. So I'd say that, 95% of our customers are using that for OKRs. But really it was for us, as you said, Carly, about accountability. How can we help teams, and especially now that people are distributed, how can we help them understand what to focus on when they come to work, and help everyone in the company also have like an easy way to keep track of everybody's focus and understand when people need their help, right? So this is what we do. We believe in simplicity. We try to keep our tool nimble. And yeah, I'm super excited to be doing this podcast with you.
Thank you. And who doesn't love simplicity? So thank you for that intro. So one of the ultimate goals with OKRs, as well as accountability and focus, is around alignment. And there's sort of a promise with OKRs that they can create an environment where everyone is aligned and happily working towards common goals, which sounds great. But can you talk us through the benefits that this has?
Yeah, so alignment, I think, is a word that sometimes gets misused because it feels when we talk about it like, the common way to describe it is to talk about a North Star. It's like, what's the North Star of the company? And then you want to rally all the teams behind it and make sure that everybody is pointing in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And the thing that we don't talk about as much is the fact that North Star tend to be a moving target, right? So for me, the alignment piece, it's not like a thing that is, it's not an immovable object or immovable method. It's something that needs to be living, which is something that for me is an approach of OKRs that is not talked about enough. But so what you want in the company is that you want to have, first of all, you want to have a simple way for everybody to talk about their focus, right? So you want to have a shared language within a company. Then once you have that, you want to be able to use that shared language to be able to compare teams and understand what are the different teams doing? And this is what gets really hard to do as you scale up, because everybody is busy doing a lot of things every day, right? And the work we do to reach our goals creates distraction. I'm sorry, I'm going to be on a bit of a tangent here, but it's a very simple example. Say that, we both decide to achieve a certain goal, or, okay, I don't have an example here. Oh, we want to launch a bakery. Right? That's our goal. And then we start to work on what we need to do to do that. And then we'll be pulled in a lot of different directions to understand, it's we need to have recipes, we need to have a place, we need to have a business plan. And then it's really easy for people to lose track of the goals, right? So alignment is not only about, understanding the direction, but it's also about not losing focus. And it's also about understanding when you need, to change your goal. It's all those things at once. And so what I love about OKRs is that it simplifies all of this. It codifies. Basically, it's not the only way for people to track their goals. It's not the ultimate goal setting framework, but it is one that works really well. And so for me, this is the thing about OKRs. It's a simple way to codify a lot of things in the company to make sure that it is as easy as possible to get that alignment, or even better to understand when you start to lose the alignment, right? Which is the part for me that is more important. It's more important to know when things are not working than when things are working, because when things are working, it's fine. But sometimes it's easy to lose track of the bigger picture, and then you start drifting away from your goals, but you're not really aware of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's an important point, because there are many, articles, blogs, and podcasts out there about, the benefits of being aligned and being in a place where you have that strong alignment. But as you said, it's important to have that focus and to know when you do have some misalignment. So you've touched on it there, but taking it a step back, I guess the first milestone is not to achieve alignment, but it's to create visibility across teams. Can you just talk about that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah. Sorry, I feel like maybe I jumped a few steps here.
No, that's fine.
But so the classic story, and this is something that I've lived myself, like being part of a team of a company. It's like when I worked, I started in a company that had 450 people, which was pretty big at the time. And then by the time I left, we had 2,500 people. And that happened in the span of 5 years. And so what happens when you have that like hyper growth going is that teams, you can only do that if you give teams a certain amount of autonomy. And this is great. It needs to happen. You need to be able to trust your teams that they can self-organize and they can figure out patterns, or ways for them to be effective. Now, what happens is that if there's no framework that kind of like, set some kind of boundaries for the team about like, this is your freedom and that this is what we need from you to be able to understand what you're doing, then what happens is like every team comes up with own framework to say focus. So practically, to make this like as easy as possible to understand, it means that one team, you go to a marketing team and you ask what they're doing, and they talk to you about like themes and goals. And then you go to the engineering team, and then they talk about priorities and big rocks. And then you go to your design team, and then they talk about, it's like focus areas and initiatives. And so they're all talking about the priorities. They're all talking about the focus, but they all have different ways to do this. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a manager, if you're a leader in that organization, it is really hard for you to make sense of what's happening and to understand how you can help people, because every time you talk to a different team, they use a different language. Mm. And so that's a visibility part. Is like, for me, what I like again about OKRs is that it's not that it's a perfect framework, but it's one that works, and one that codifies the language around focus. Now everybody has to reframe, the focus by using objectives and key results. In some cases, like I like actually to add like the objective key results initiatives, because I think it helps people understand the difference between a key result and a project.
Yeah.
But it means that now you can go from one team to another, and you can say the same. You can ask the same question, and people know what's behind the question. You can say like, what are your key results? But what are your objectives? And it's easy now to compare people. So that for me, that's the visibility aspect. It means that it's much, much simpler to look at, the bigger picture, to look at the different teams and make sure that there is alignment or not, right? It's like without like a shared language, it's very difficult to do. And another thing, for me, it's like, I see online, like every time I think something gets popular, it gets criticized, like right off the bat. It's like people say, oh no, this doesn't work. And the truth is like, even if you're not using OKRs, you'll need to have like a way to do the same thing. You'll need to have like a system in place for you to be able to like talk to one team and talk to another team and try to make sense of what they're doing. So either you can create your own framework, or you can use one that has a lot of literature behind it, that has a lot of practitioner, that has a lot of people with experience. And yeah, so for me, it just works, right? But if you want to do something else, you can. It's just like, that just simplifies this. So that's a visibility aspect of OKRs, is that even before you can decide what you want to do, right? It's like the first step is to get everyone to express a plan in the same way, in a way that, you can understand.
Yeah. And I think just linked to that as well is that it brings about transparency as well. And I think knowing, whether everyone's using the same sort of terminology, which is obviously ideal, but I think it helps give you a sense of direction, and that everyone's
absolutely
going in the right sort of direction, which is obviously very helpful. But often, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, I was about to say, because the direction is one thing, but the traction is the other one. It's like that's the transparency for me. That when we say that word, once again, for me, like OKRs are something that is supposed to be living. It's not a plan that you set at the beginning of a quarter and then you forget about it.
Just leave it. Yeah.
It's like you set that North Star. Every team, there's the one at the top of a company, which is like the top level OKRs. But then each team underneath will come and say, okay, so if we want to achieve that, this is what we want to do. And then for me, the transparency really happens when people are tracking progress on a weekly basis. And the reason I'm saying that is because now you're able, same thing, to go through the org and to be able to see like which team is doing well. I shouldn't use this word because it means that, if you do that, and it's about, it's like which team is like having an easy time achieving the OKRs, which can sometimes actually be a bad sign. Like if a team is like has too much of an easy time achieving their goals, then maybe they could have been too ambitious, a bit more ambitious. Sorry. But then at the same time, it's like now every team in the org is offering visibility toward their execution. Like it becomes possible to see how people execute. And once again, it's not about micromanaging people. It's more about understanding who needs help, like who can I help, who's doing well. And who's working on something that maybe, need to be readjusted. It's like, for me, it's just like there's brilliant things that can happen when you get that level of transparency and also clarity around, there's a strategy, but this is how we're all executing on it.
Yeah, no, well, that's very important. And often leaders get to a stage where they think OKRs have created or caused some sort of misalignment, which isn't the case. What do you think has actually happened? I know you wrote a great blog on this. I've pulled a bit out from there.
Yeah, so I've seen that happening a few times. There's actually I'm not going to name names, but there are companies where you can search online and you can find companies. Actually, no, I'm not going to. There's a company that literally they stopped using OKRs, and they said, yeah, it wasn't working for us, and then they got back to the framework a year later, because once again, as I said, it's like no matter what, you'll need a way for you to be able to express focus in a simple way across your org, and you'll need a way for you to track progress, and then it just works. And so now let's look at what happened. As we said, in the introduction, you talked about alignment, and I said, for me, it's like I think that the way we introduce OKRs by saying like it will help you get alignment is dangerous, because then the expectation is that as soon as everybody has things expressing objectives and key results, then everybody should just be magically working well together. And the reality is that OKRs for me, it's much more a way to codify things than it is a way to solve your culture. Just because everybody now says like, oh, my objective is X, and as measured by X by Y, it doesn't mean that you solved the organizational issues that you have. And so if people didn't work well together before, if you had like someone's had a bad manager or you had like a team underperforming, it's like it doesn't solve that. And I'm not even saying that this is the main problem. It's like you can have like great teams working amazingly, but they're generally going in different directions. And so like the reality of what happens is like before you have a system like OKRs in place to understand what's going on, it's actually really hard for you to know if a team A and team B are misaligned, right? It's like you can have your engineering team going this way, and the product team going, together, but the marketing team going a different way. And it's hard for you to understand that. And so because you don't understand it and because you don't see it, it doesn't seem to be a problem.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, so your sales team or your marketing team is using OKRs, your engineering team is using OKRs, the product team is using OKRs. And so now you start to see how things are not really working well together. And that's the thing, is that because you have visibility, it's easier for you to see problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing that happens for teams that adopt OKRs is that all of a sudden, it looks like there's a bunch of problems in the org. And I think the shortcut that some people take is that they attribute the problems to the OKR framework. Whereas for me, I come and I say, no, now you have visibility on existing issues. It's things that were there before. And now the good thing is that you have a way to, if you act on it, you'll be able to measure or to see if you're improving things. Right. And so to simplify what I'm saying, it's like, what happens is like all of a sudden, so you use OKRs, so everybody's focus is easy to see. And it's easy to see now the issues that are already existing in the org. And the knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, we have issues. It must be the framework. Let's stop doing it. Whereas for me, what I see that I'm like, oh, this should be celebrated as a victory. Now we understand how we can improve. Right. So now we have like some ideas of, what's not working today. And the next step is to actually iterate on that and to try to tackle, some of these issues one at a time. So that's what I think happens. Is that people get to see the misalignment, and then the reaction is to say like, well, we don't like what we're seeing, so we're going to reject the framework. Whereas I think that this is like, for me, it's like, oh, okay, the framework is working well because it's showing us places where things are not, well put together, and this is what we need to improve. No organization, actually, a better way for me to put it is that if you show me an org that a company or a team that is using OKRs and that is never seeing any misalignment, but every time you talk to them, they say like, no, we're always like, I would challenge the way they do things, because it's impossible for a team to not like start drifting away. Like that's what just happens. And so the idea is like, oh, okay, so we like, I think the success for me is defined by a team that is able to identify those things rapidly and then correct the course, like also rapidly. And so this is what happens, is like they drift away, they go back to there, they drift away, they go back to there together with fast cycles.
I think that's a really good point. And I think, I guess it's like you said, it's easy and a bit of a knee-jerk reaction to blame OKRs or whatever goal-setting framework it is. There are obviously various different frameworks that people use. Whereas in actual fact, it's, as you've just mentioned, it should be, looking at what the issues are and trying to overcome those issues. So don't blame the framework. So then I know that. Sorry, Sten.
Yeah, I was about to say that, there are times where there are definitely some teams that, in my opinion, they're not well suited for OKRs, and in which case, you adopt the framework and then you try to, for instance, I'll give you an example. If you're an agency and you work on projects, right? So you have one project and then you work on the next project and then you work on the next project. It's actually quite hard to apply OKRs to this, because it's a short-lived, like the goal is to deliver something. Whereas like, it's like, I think that OKRs, or, same thing, like I had the service companies, like your lawyer, your accountant, it's going to be difficult as well, because the long-term goals are a little bit harder to define. But if you're a product company, if you're basically, if you're building something that needs to iterate over time and there's no like really end to what you're building, you're just trying to improve and improve and improve. And it's, not really clear, what are the different avenues for you to do this. And this is where this framework is really useful, because it helps tell people, is like, this is what we want to try to achieve by the end of a quarter. Now go ahead and try things that can get us there. Right. And then we're going to use the key results to measure that, the things we're trying are actually good, whereas like some of the things might be bad, and then we'll just drop them. Right. So that's just a caveat. There are definitely cases where I think OKRs won't work and you adopt it, and then it's just confusing because you're trying to measure things, but you don't know what to measure. But for a lot of teams, I think it's just a beautiful way to codify focus. It's a very useful tool. And the first thing that happens when you'll have all your teams speaking the same language is that you'll realize that, hey, they've been working on different things. And that's just normal.
And I think just going back to some of the problems or issues that can come out boils down to some cultural issues internally. And I think some people then think, oh, OKRs don't work, when actually there's a deeper issue or number of issues around culture that needs addressing. And OKRs are not going to work for your organization if you have those sorts of issues. So I know at Derby Giants, if we work with clients and we uncover some of those cultural issues, we work with the organization on those, because otherwise you just doomed to fail. So I think there's a big piece around that as well.
Yeah.
How can having a system like Tability, so bringing in an OKR system, help with the process to create alignment and to help keep people on track?
Yeah, so what we try to do is same thing as I was saying. It's funny because I didn't think about that at the beginning, but I used the word codify a lot, and that's a little bit what we're trying to do. Is like we're trying to guide people to help them avoid making some mistakes that are classic mistakes. One, for instance, it's like key results should be measurable. And so in Tability, when you create a plan, we actually take you through a structure. We try to be prescriptive about what we believe is going to be a good system. And one such thing is like, the first question that happens is like, what's your objective? And then the second question is, what's a measurable outcome for that objective? And we're all about, showing you progress and charts and helping people then do those check-ins, do the weekly, I talked about like tracking progress on a weekly basis. It's all about that. So what we do is like we actually take out a lot of heavy lifting that you have to do to teach people how to do OKRs. We simplify the entire process and we automate the accountability part. Now, it's like what I like to say. This is me shooting myself in the foot. Like I'm not a salesperson, but I would say that for people, the first time they do OKRs, they should probably use whatever tool they're familiar with. Because same thing, what we don't want people to do is we don't want them to blame something else, right? If they say that, you start to use Tability and then people see misalignment or something, and then they're like, well, maybe it's a tool. So what I said to teams is like, if you're already mature with OKRs, if you know what you're doing, then by all means, jump on the tool. Well, we're going to save your team like thousands of hours every month. Well, not every month, maybe it depends on the type of company, but we're going to save you a lot of time and we're going to make it as easy as possible for people to track progress and to see where they are. But for a team that is new to OKRs, I would say if you've been using spreadsheet, start with a spreadsheet, do the first cycle, see how people feel. What I can guarantee is like by the end of the second cycle, people will start getting frustrated with spreadsheets. And one of the reasons is because it's really hard to visualize progress. It's really hard to find what is attached to your name. It's really hard to actually really make sense of, it's like, what are the teams that are doing OKRs right? What are the teams that are not, that need to be improved? And this is something that Tability makes super easy. Right. So I'll stop here with the spiel, but so our job for us is like, it's like, we're definitely coming from, I'm an ex-product manager. Everyone on the team has been part of a actual team building products. And so that's the angle that we have. It's like, we don't take an HR angle to the problem. We take really how can we be the product that helps the team building products, building services? How can we help them without, being in the way? And so that's our job.
No, and I like the point you made as, not being a salesperson, but talking about, if you are new to OKRs, then don't jump in and try and use a whole new software, because then it goes wrong, you'll blame the software, and then you'll have all sorts of problems. But I think there's definitely there's a lot of conversations around using spreadsheets and software. But I think when it comes to spreadsheets, when you have more, it becomes more complex when you have cross-functional goals and different complex objectives, and it just can become a bit messy. And I think the automation of some of the process and the simplification is great. So I think there's definitely a lot of pros to use and to track in your OKRs. And it helps, like you mentioned, the weekly check-ins as well. Sorry, Steph.
Yeah, so I was about to say, because it's actually, there's a big parallel between, for me, using a spreadsheet and all the things that we talked about. Like one of the issues with spreadsheets for org, once again, that start to scale, is that everybody does the spreadsheet a different way. And so it becomes the same. You're at and for me, it's like you have to look at the practical aspect of a spreadsheet. If we talk about it like at a high level, it looks like, oh yeah, sure, it's going to work. But from in practice, what it looks like is like you have to manage 6 teams, and you'll have to find among the hundreds of other spreadsheets are used for everything in the company. So now you have to, if you don't have bookmarked, you haven't bookmarked with spreadsheets, you have to find those 6 teams. Then you look at each team, and each team probably has tweaked the spreadsheet because they like it better a certain way. And so it's the same problem of like, yes, we're using OKRs, but now when I looked at things, it all looks different. And then spreadsheets, they don't know that they need to be updated. So if you have a goal and you put it in a spreadsheet, like you have to remember on a Monday or on a Friday that you need to go back to that spreadsheet and update it. So what happens once again is like usually there's someone in the company that has a reminder that says like send email to the entire team. And then there's an email that goes on Friday saying, don't forget to update your goals. And it feels a bit, that micromanagement, like why is blah telling me every week to do these things? I know that I should be doing it.
Yeah.
So what Tability does is that we come here to solve all these problems, right? So in Tability, every team will look the same. When they create a plan, it all looks the same, and it's effective, it works well, and it means that if I go from one team to the other, it's really easy for me to understand what they're doing and where they're struggling, because I know exactly what to look at, and it's in the same position in the UI. And the second part is like we take care of the reminders. So that's the name Tability comes from accountability. And so the idea for us was that if you give us your goals, we'll make sure that you won't forget about it. That's our job, is to make sure, it's like we want to help you achieve your goals. And we can't tell you how to do what to do, but we can sure as hell like help, after a nice weekend, on a Monday, like tell you like, hey, by the way, before you go and start working this week, like those are your priorities. Now you know about it. Here's where you are today. Here's where you're supposed to be. You understand the difference. Now go ahead and do amazing work.
Yeah, and there's definitely, like you said, that consistency, rather than having 6 spreadsheets all over the place and having people messaging you every week or to update your spreadsheet. So there's definitely a lot of benefits to be had. I wanted to ask you, I would like to leave with a piece of advice for our listeners. You might have one, you might have more, but I just wondered what advice you would give to anyone out there that's listening that is struggling with creating alignment around that OKRs. They're not blaming the framework. There's no. Yeah. I know it sort of depends on various different issues, but I just wondered if there's anything that stands out.
Yeah. So okay. So the simplest for me, forget about the tools. Right. It's like for me, it's all about. Do you have a meeting on a weekly basis? It should be a weekly meeting where you have the leaders of the teams that are misaligned. They need to get together and all talk about progress. And I think the best way, it comes from my background is in development and continuous integration, continuous development, deployment. And one thing that is very effective is like one way to solve problems is to test things often. And because now the cost of decisions like decreases. Like one of the problems that people have is like they often try to solve everything in one meeting, because the next meeting might be like in a month, 2 months, 3 months. And so there's this pressure, to try to solve all the problems right now. Whereas like if you accept that maybe we're not going to have all the answers today, but we're going to just meet again next week and meet again and meet again. I think that process of having a meeting with the right people where you talk things through, it's the easiest way to solve all these problems. So the company I used to work for was Atlassian. And the one thing that things change over the years. Like the process you have when you have 400 people, not the same process you have when you have 600 people, and not the same processes that you have when you have 1,000 people. But the one thing that they kept was retrospective. And every team had to do retrospectives, and not just about the code, it was also about the way we work. And that is what helped us to understand how to solve existing problem. And you do that, and that's what I mean. It's like on a periodic basis, basically you meet and then you look at a problem, then you're able to solve those problems because the same people have enough conversation and enough data to adjust things. So once again, I've talked too much to make a point, but I'd say, it's like if you see misalignment, my tip is don't try to solve that into one meeting. Don't try to have an amazing workshop that the expectation that at the end of a workshop is that all the problems are solved. It never works. At best, what you can have is people understand that there are problems and they agree that, it's problems exist. And my advice then is to not set the next meeting a month, 4 weeks from now, is to set the next meeting. It's don't do 1-2 hours meetings every 3 months, do 30 minutes meetings every week.
Yeah.
And this is a great way to identify problems, to try things, to weed out bad goals, and to just let conversation flow. And give it time. And then I guarantee that in 3 or 4 weeks, a lot of the misalignment, they'll just disappear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. It's a really good piece of advice. And as you were talking, I just kept thinking Rome wasn't built in a day. But it sounds very cliche, but we were talking about people trying to, resolve things in a 1 hour meeting. But yeah, I think the weekly check-ins or bi-weekly, depending on your situation, but I think no more than no longer, don't leave it any longer than that. I think they're really important. You can, like you said, and I think communication and conversation and having that open space where you can resolve any issues or at least talk about them, and then see how, testing, learning, adapting, it's all part of the OKR process. So
I have a saying that I like to give people when they're struggling and to accept or to decide that it's for most companies, what's more important is to minimize the cost of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is part of it, we take those things as the assumption is that we're right. And I do hope that, it's if we make decisions in our company, I do hope that it's the right one. But the question is what if we're wrong? How long will we go being wrong, wasting resources, wasting time before we can realize that we should be doing something else? Mm-hmm. So once you take that framework, once you think about it as about it's not about being right, but it's about let's try to minimize the cost of being wrong, it becomes easier to accept that, hey, do you know what? Yeah, we should meet again next week. And it's not about having a heavy meeting. It's just just a quick check-in. It's we look at the OKRs and make sure everything's good, because the idea is more to be able to identify quickly when things are not good, because then this is what becomes expensive for an organization. Mm-hmm. So this is my thing is the best way to minimize the cost of being wrong is to have those frequent, short but frequent enough review. Not every day, but it's if it's too long, then that increases the cost of everything.
Yeah, I like that. I do like a saying, so I'm going to take that one. Thank you, Sten, for joining me for today's episode of Giant Talk. It's been great to talk to you, to hear more about, how misalignment isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's been really interesting, and to hear more about Tability itself and the pros of using OKR software. So thank you to you, and thank you to our listeners for joining us for another episode of Giant Talk. If you have any feedback, or if you just want to chat, please do get in touch with us by emailing growth@therebegiants.com. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Ciao.